Hello and welcome to Journeys and Journals. I'm Bernie Martin Beck and I get to talk history. My guests today have history that goes clear back to the Revolutionary War. That's more history than I have, and I'd like you to meet them. You are?
I'm Jean Holland.
Jean, and welcome to Journeys and Journals.
Thank you.
And your family goes way, way back.
Way back. My father's family came on the Mayflower.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Now, can you top that? You are?
Barbara Johnson.
And when did your family come to this new world?
They were in the late 1600s.
1600 and early?
1620.
1620. Can you prove it?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. How can I trust that you can prove it?
Because New England is really great about town histories. And so there are records that show we are related to John Holland, the guy that fell overboard.
What a shame.
I know. He fell overboard and they rescued him during the voyage.
So he lived to produce children, and you are one of those.
Yep.
1600?
I think 1620 is when the 1620 something is when the Mayflower landed.
And DAR stands for what?
Daughters of the American Revolution.
And that obviously qualifies you. But you've got lots of stories, and I'd love to hear them. The organization of Daughters of the American Revolution is nationwide?
Nationwide. Nationally, we have 170,000 members.
Oh, my.
There are, let me read here, it says how many chapters we have. We have 3,000 chapters across the United States. We have chapters in Australia, and Barbara belongs to one in Germany.
How do you happen to belong in one in Germany, Barbara?
You sign up or contact them to be an associate member, and you pay yearly dues. And I chose Germany because that's where one line of my family is from.
Now, how do you know that?
Through researching my family history.
Okay, now how could I research my family history?
Lots of ways. You can go on Williams Highway to the Family History Center at the LDS Church. There's many websites and available to you for free. You can contact DAR in Washington, D.C. through a website.
And let's put that website up here on the screen, because there's going to be people at the end of this show that want to make contact not only with the international organization, but right in their community. There are chapters throughout the state of Oregon and California?
Yes, there's 34 chapters in Oregon. There is a state regent who's from Hood River.
Now, when you say regent, is that like president of
Yes.
or chairman of this whole state?
Yes.
Of the state.
And do you have conventions?
We do. In soon.
May is a conference, state conference.
And what about, well, how long have you been involved in this?
I joined the DAR, I think around 1998 or so. But my mother was a member, her mother was a member, and her mother was a member.
Oh, wow.
And so my great-grandmother was a granddaughter of a Revolutionary War soldier.
So that means that you didn't have to do all this work.
No, it was very simple for me. I just had to prove my relationship to my mother.
And you probably have a birth certificate that says, Mom gave birth to. Now, was it so easy for you, or did you have to work harder?
I was able to access the DAR website in Washington, D.C., and I learned that I had a patriot in Massachusetts, Daniel Ware, and a second one, Ichabod McLean. that were both in the Revolutionary War. So I chose to look up those two names on a national database, found them there, and below their name is a list of people, my relatives that I did not know, who had previously joined DAR.
That goes back how far?
Oh, it can go back to when DAR started in 1890.
1890.
Yes. And then I linked in to one of those people who was the newest DAR member like myself. I linked into one of those, and that's how my application was approved. So I was able to gather documents from myself back to that relative. I didn't have to gather documents further back because those had already been proven.
Wow.
To the patriot. Yeah.
The patriot.
Mm-hmm.
That's a word we don't use real often. It's a part of your organization. I mean, if you say patriot to you, you know exactly what she means.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that is a named soldier.
And not only just soldiers, it was anyone who contributed to the cause of, our revolution. So it could have been a minister, it could have been a shopkeeper who donated food, it could have been a farmer who gave crops to the soldiers, could have been someone who didn't want to go to war but paid somebody else to go for him. He could also be a patriot.
That's sort of like a conscientious objector, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But they would pay to have someone go in their stead. That's interesting.
So not only someone who fought the battle, but a lot of other people, if you paid taxes in support of the cause, lots of things.
Well, now tell me
qualify.
about your guy.
Well, Daniel Ware was my patriot that I actually was able to join DAR through. And he, I learned, was a Minuteman in the very first battle of the Revolutionary War at Lexington, Concord.
So he might have actually shaken hands with or followed I'm forgetting the name of the man with the torch who said...
Paul Revere?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They lived in the area near Boston, yes.
And that's where it all began.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. Now, some of the slogans that we've come up with that are in our language right now come out of this war, right? Mm-hmm. Can you name me a few?
Not.
I think of live free or die.
That's
yes,
a good one.
Yes, yes.
And they were willing to do that. And
Yeah, most of the people that participated in the war ended up broke afterwards. I mean, and one of the things we talk about is the men and women who sacrificed their lives and fortunes for this cause, that it was very costly to the American people to break away from England in many ways.
To have a tea party. It all starts with tea, doesn't it?
A lot of it does, yes. Yes.
And the Boston Tea Party, people said, we will no longer support the mother country. We want to be free.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the people were just farmers. Like my person, he was a farmer. He later was Justice of the Peace and a few other things, but he started out as a farmer, and then he was trained to be a Minuteman in that first battle. And other relatives from their town went as well.
And he lived to tell the story?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Isn't that wonderful? And you've been able to trace this.
Mm-hmm. And go to the area, they have a Minuteman National Military Park outside of Boston.
And have you been there personally?
Yes. I've stood on the North Bridge, which is where that first battle took place. It was awesome. My daughter and I went a couple years ago. and stood on that bridge. And then they also have a monument there to the Minutemen who fought there.
I'm so proud. I thank you so much for coming.
Yes.
Your show is one of our most historic of all shows that we've ever done. Because who could go back any farther
Right.
than the Mayflower? Was this the first Mayflower journey, or? And you can prove it.
Yep.
What stories came down by the fireside to you?
Well, it's interesting that I didn't even know about the Mayflower ancestor till 10 years ago. So there's no really family stories of this, but I had an aunt who was very much into genealogy, and she was able to trace our line, her line.
So you didn't sit down by the fireside and Mom sitting there with the
No.
knitting, doing the storytelling. Did your family tell stories?
No, my father never knew that this revolutionary patriot existed. He died before I found this out.
And
And it was in his line of the family where it was discovered, and he did not know this. His older sister did. I was able to share it with her, and she died at 96, so just a couple years before she died, I was able to share with her about finding the patriots and all of that history.
it's so exciting because we are so appreciative of the freedoms that we enjoyed, but we came during the Irish potato famine, came by way of Canada and finally into the US, and we're just grateful to have these freedoms that you folk, your pioneer folk, fought for. How many of today, this booklet is beautifully done. There's one word here, education. Let's talk. What do you do about education?
At the national level, they sponsor three schools?
Or maybe it's more than that
More
now.
than that.
Yeah.
We also help with the Indian school up in Salem.
Shamawa.
Shamawa.
Yeah.
The DAR helps with that some. There are schools in Appalachia that the DAR is involved with. We promote education whenever possible.
Isn't that wonderful? Now, you mentioned something about it hasn't always been a women's history. How would you describe that?
The beginnings of DAR?
Yes.
DAR was organized in 1890, and mostly because there were women who were interested in our history and honoring the patriots of the Revolutionary War, and there was already a men's group called the Sons of the American Revolution, and they had voted that no women could belong. So these women wanted to start an organization that women could belong to.
Because they were very proud of their heritage.
Yeah, and there were women that were patriots also. We have women that directly, contributed to the cause and are patriots, so it wasn't just the men.
I think I visited a place where an old gray-haired woman stood and said, "Shoot this gray-haired if you would, but give me liberty or give me death," something like that. And I was able to visit that town up in New England, that's right, where it came from. You've brought so many treasures here. We'll start with your newspaper.
That's the magazine that comes from the National Society. And this is for anyone can get this magazine.
Okay, it's called?
The American Spirit.
And it just fills in things to be proud of. things that have been restored and not bulldozed down and build a shopping center on them. Excuse me,
Yes.
but this is really interesting. You've got to tell me. Every year you get one of these?
Every year we get a calendar. And
And
this is a picture of our national officers. So we have the lady in the center is our current president general. She is over all the society. And then these are the people that help her run the society.
And so all year you get to look at one of these wonderful pictures that tells history. Oh, are these for sale?
Yes, yes, they are, yes. At the national office in Washington, D.C., yes.
So that's how you folks can get it if you're as interested in this as I am. You've brought flags. There's a story behind them.
Well, the one on the left is Daniel Ware, the Minuteman I spoke of. And the flag shows his name and the state of Massachusetts that he served in. The second flag, the one on the right, is Ichabod McLean, who is my other ancestor who is buried on the family farm in Maine, and he served in Massachusetts as well. Two different lines of the family. And there are more that I have not prepared applications for as yet.
As yet, you mean you're still working on
They are
it?
called supplemental applications. After you do the original one and become a member, then you have the option of preparing supplemental applications and registering more ancestors
Well, you know,
or patriots.
I just feel like I should have put on my sunbonnet for you gals. I feel so historic, you know, pioneering because these women really did war supply. Is that right? I mean, I just need to get into the act here. Tell me, if you would, about stories of men and women patriots that really have made a difference in your life. How have you they've made a contribution in your family line to how you feel about being an American or being you or your family?
Well, you know, I like history, and I think part of the reason I like history is because I know that people in my family were there, and that someone participated in these different things. So that makes history more alive for me, because I can then relate it to who I am now because of these people I'm here.
And what about your family? Do you have youngsters that are interested in what you've
I
done?
have children who are not interested yet, but they're young and working and don't want to take the time.
But it'll be so easy for them now, won't
Very
it?
easy.
Because you've done the work which your mother did, which your grandmother,
And my great-grandmother.
and her name?
Her name was Susan Davis Cram. She was a Davis, and that's the patriot we went through was Daniel Davis. He was a Revolutionary War soldier, bachelor till he was 50, married and had 12 children. And when he was 90-something...
A very young wife, I assume.
Oh, yes. When he was in his 90s, he decided maybe he should go get his pension for being in the war. So he got on his horse and went riding off to another state to get signed up for his pension.
And do you know how much pension was?
I think it was like $12 a year or something. It was not much.
Yes, but that
That was a
probably
lot
brought
then.
lots of bread.
Yeah.
And do you know about your bearer?
Well, I know that Daniel Ware received a pension, and then his widow also after he died.
Wonderful, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, the widows.
It's,
But they did eventually, but the ability to sign up for a pension, I think, came a bit later than when they, like some could get it when they finished with the war, but it took a while before they actually passed the
Now, did
law.
any of these people get property? Was that
Well,
part
the
of
Ichabod McLean that settled in Maine the rest of his life, that's how Maine became a state around 1800. So then they were opening up the state because of the land for these soldiers to
So-
obtain.
So it's something like happened here with the GI Bill in my generation, or World War II generation. They had a lottery. If you'd been in the war and you came back and you wanted property,
Right.
oh
right.
man, they looked
And he
at
rode horseback for many miles through. He took a boat from the Boston area up into Maine, came into one of the ports, and then he and his son, who was about 10, one of his sons, rode horseback up through the woods of Maine to the area where this land was to be given, and figured out where he wanted to have his land. And they also call it Veterans Road, the area where they settled in this little area in central Maine. They call it Veterans Road.
Do you know how much property they were given?
I do not know because it was much later that I was able to find out where he settled.
Oh,
And I don't know how many acres, but that's how they settled a lot of Maine, was from those
because
soldiers.
I had on an earlier show, a family, they're told about Klamath Falls, and they had gotten the drawing and had put their mark on property there. Family. You've got a dozen avenues that we could go down. So why don't you choose one and just tell us about it?
I don't know what.
Some of our local projects,
We
maybe?
could talk about, our chapter has been in this area. Well, we were organized in 1934.
34.
And
Wow,
so
that's a long time ago. About
70 years next year. We're doing our anniversary next year. We're having a tea at
2014. You're having your anniversary.
80 years.
Yes.
I was
And
saying 70, it's 80.
is that something we,
That's something that we want to talk about. We have charter members, a list of our charter members who are from many of the well-known families in this area. Mrs. A.E. Voorhees,
of course, from the newspaper.
Mrs. John Robinson, Mrs. Frank Hart,
I wonder if
Mrs.
that-
George Eaton, Mrs. Harry Floyd, Mrs. Emma Moses, Mrs. Skillman Van Cott. Those are some of the people that were the charter members when it was organized in 1934.
If you've just heard your family name and would like to get in touch with these people, how in the world can they get in touch with you?
They could call myself or Jeannie.
We'll put up your numbers, and so you're welcome, people who have those
Oh, yes.
connections.
Oh, yes.
Well, I have been in contact with a descendant, Elizabeth Werner, who lives in Clearwater, Florida. She is a great-great-granddaughter of Mrs. Hart, who is one of the charter members, and she's been very interested and also very helpful to us in some of the history of her great-great-great-grandmother as the 80th anniversary approaches.
Celebrate these
Yes.
landmarks. These,
So we would like to contact descendants out of these families if they're still anywhere in the area or not.
right. And going online, doesn't that seem very, very funny that you can use technology of 2004 14 to find someone in the, what year? 1600.
Yeah, 1620s.
And you said you've gone on the computer to do some of your work? Just, isn't this wonderful, folks? We have this opportunity to learn and research. It's not just book learning. If they could talk, what would be the first question you'd ask? Do you wish they'd have written a letter?
Yes, I think so. That would have been nice, just.
Said breakfast this morning was that same
Yeah, a
old-
journal would have been interesting to read.
Do other people have journals from their family?
I would imagine some people do. I have letters that are over 100 years old out of my family. In fact, some of the letters are from these siblings that lived in Maine to their one brother who came all the way to Oregon. Everybody else stayed in Maine, but he came and settled in Oregon. And they're talking about the women's right to vote and various things in the sister to the brother and what she thought about that.
Ooh, maybe you could talk.
And that takes you back to living history right there.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, I'd be
It does.
interested in that. I just opened up their book here. And folks, how much more history and connection could we be? Apple pie.
Yeah.
Your history has been wonderful, and thank you for letting me walk down your family road.
Yes.
Thank you.
And if we can, let's talk more.
Okay.
I'm Bernie Martin Beck, and I love history, even in a sunbonnet. And those were so important because, well, it was hot and it was sunny. And work, of course, for women as well as men was outdoors. And they came across the country pioneering. I'm Bernie Martin Beck saying thanks so much for tuning in. And thank you for being my guest.
Thank you.
Thank you.